It seems like since the dawn of the theme park, we've had a fascination with the dark and macabre, from the classic pretzel dark rides like Laughland, or Disneyland's questionably scary Fantasyland pretzel dark rides, or the now iconic Haunted Mansion. While these dark rides gave a good fright, they were still family friendly. But another theme park in California decided to kickstart a new industry change, one with a Halloween event that would focus on the scares.
Tired of Halloween parties that really bite? Come to Knott's Halloween Haunt!
Aren't you afraid, Grant?
With dozens of horrifying rides, shows and attractions!
Scared stiff.
It's the biggest and scariest Halloween party
In the world.
with 11 mind-twisting mazes, monsters, mayhem and madness. So hurry and get your tickets to Knott's Halloween Haunt before it sells out. They're tickets to die for!
Just celebrating its 50th anniversary, Knott's Scary Farm is often credited as the event that started it all. What began in 1973 with a handful of roaming monsters and spooky decorations in Ghost Town became the first fully realized Halloween theme park event. Its success showed that guests craved something darker, a transformation of the entire park into a world of terror. Following Knott's lead, other parks took notice. In 1986, Six Flags launched Fright Fest, bringing costume ghouls and theatrical scares to a growing network of parks across the country. While Knott's Scary Farm laid the foundation for Halloween theme park events on the West Coast, Florida was quietly building its own legacy. In 1991, Universal Studios Florida introduced a small 3-night event called Fright Nights. It wasn't much by today's standards, just one haunted house tucked away in the back of the park. But it sparked something. Guests were thrilled by the idea of Universal After Dark, and it was such a success that it would return the next year, bigger and better, and this time with a more iconic name.
Hello, kiddies! Crypt Keeper here, Master of Ceremonies at Universal Studios, all new Halloween Horror Nights. With new haunted houses to die for, you'll make some new fiends, play a starring role in a killer show, and lots more.
Don't miss the last 2 weekends of terror. Florida residents save. Advance tickets just $22 at Ticketmaster with a 2-liter Pepsi label.
Party with me at Universal's Halloween Horror Nights. You'll dig it.
Over the years, Halloween Horror Nights has drastically changed the theme park haunt scene, bringing in massive popular IPs and original stories, with cinematic-level set design. Also, each year would feature an icon that now has gained cult-level following, such as Jack the Clown. It makes sense with the popularity of Halloween Horror Nights, other parks would attempt to follow suit with their own Halloween event. And just down the road in Florida, another park would be creating a Halloween event of their own. Busch Gardens would launch Spooky Safari, a family-friendly daytime Halloween event featuring one haunted house in the Miami Reserve area and a few family-friendly activities. To understand how Busch Gardens made the leap from lighthearted frights to full-scale horror, you have to talk to the people that were there shaping it from the ground up. One of those people is Scott Swenson, a name that became synonymous with the golden age of Howl-O-Scream. As the event's original creative director, Scott helped transform a seasonal offering into iconic, immersive horror experience.
Hi, I'm Scott Swenson. I'm the owner and CEO of Scott Swenson Creative Development, and I was part of the team that put together Howl-O-Scream for the very first time in Busch Gardens, Tampa, and was the creative director for about 15 years. It was kind of an interesting story. We were assigned, there was a small group of us who were pulled from our regular positions and given the assignment to come up with a great fall event. And at the time, we were terrified of actually doing a Halloween event because Universal was already, going very successfully with Halloween Horror Nights. So we thought, well, what else can we do? And so we took an entire year to research and figure out what actually will work for a theme park in the fall. And the only thing at the time was a Halloween event. So we decided, well, let's go for it. And you mentioned Spooky Safari. Spooky Safari was a test, and it was a very family-friendly test. And what was really interesting to us, because again, Busch Gardens' primary audience at the time, and still is, very family-friendly. And so we thought, let's do a family-friendly Halloween event, and it'll be right in line with our brand. Unfortunately, the guest response was not as positive as we had anticipated. And they basically said, if you're going to do a nighttime event, let us leave the little ones at home, and we'll come and be scared. So that was when we started to ramp up the fear and make it more intense. And So after a year's worth of research and a bunch of visiting a bunch of the competitors, we decided let's put together an event called Howl-O-Scream.
Scott also played the very first icon, Dr. Livingstone.
I can officially say I was the first Howl-O-Scream spokesperson. I did play a character called Dr. Livingstone, and that was actually a carryover from Spooky Safari. Livingstone was the title character in one of the haunted houses, and I had played him on and off. I didn't do every night, but I kind of filled in during Spooky Safari as that character. And they decided, well, let's keep that character and use it for media purposes. So I appeared quite a bit in local media, and then I also did outreach where we would go to large corporations that were selling big blocks of tickets and dress up as that slimy explorer who was sort of, I always thought of him as sort of a cross between like Beetlejuice and I don't know, some other snarly comedian. I don't know. But he was always very snarky and had a certain amount of humor to him. He was never completely terrifying, but he was always on the edge. One of the coolest things about playing that character, actually, was I got to work with the zoo department, and I was trained to handle certain animals that were part of the collection. So I actually got trained to handle ball pythons, hissing cockroaches, and tarantulas. And the only one that made me the least bit nervous, and rats. I love the rats. The only one that made me the least bit nervous, though, was the tarantula, because tarantulas are very delicate, and I was always afraid it was going to walk off my hand and explode like a furry water balloon in the middle of an interview. But it never happened, because I was very careful and well-trained. But yeah, so I got to do a lot of fun stuff as Livingstone. And Livingstone had sort of a snarly sort of attitude like this. So he was really fun to play.
The first year of Howl-O-Scream was relatively tame and simple and still family-friendly, and only featured 3 haunted houses. Those haunted houses included the Haunted Jungle Trail, the Labyrinth of Lost Souls, and Dark Caverns. The event would feature a roaming scare zone called Creatures of the Night. Butch Patrick would make an appearance from the Munsters, as well as a show called The Amazing Crunchkin. That very same year, Busch Gardens Williamsburg debuted Howl-O-Scream with an icon of their own, known as Jack, a playful trickster pumpkin man of sorts. The only haunted house that year was the Dark Tower, and was located in the then empty simulator building. Like the most of the haunted houses we'll get to, this haunted house reused a lot of the sets from the simulator ride that was here. It featured scare actors and some props scattered throughout the queue line, but it was mostly a family-friendly walkthrough attraction that was apparently pretty tame. The very next year, Tampa would up the ante with more attractions, but relatively the same event as it was in 2000. Dr. Livingstone would return as the icon, and haunted houses such as the Dark Cavern, Labyrinth of Lost Souls, and the Haunted Jungle Trail would return. Butch Patrick would make a return once again, as well as a new edition of the car from the Munsters being featured as a photo op. Busch Gardens Williamsburg's Howl-O-Scream would return bigger and better than ever. The daytime-nighttime train experience would return relatively the same as it was the last year. One of the new additions that year was No Escape from Pompeii, a haunted house located under the Escape from Pompeii attraction, and the story would be as follows. You are invited to explore your adventurous side at a newly unearthed excavation area underneath a Pompeii temple where news of unexpected happenings have occurred. As you approach the archaeological dig-in process, faint rumbles and frightened screams are heard, daring brave souls to travel into the unknown. 3 shows debuted that year. The Starlight Orchestra became the Star Fright Orchestra, playing Halloween favorites. Fiends in the Fest House was an adult comedy show parodying that year's world events. And the Laser Fright Show was a laser show also set to Halloween favorites. Now, I couldn't find much about Howl-O-Scream San Antonio's early years, but my guess is Jack's Frightmare Forest was at least present for the early years of the event as well, but it seems like it leans more towards being family-friendly, as Shamu was the icon for the first few years, without, something scary. So I think it was just mostly riding a Cursors After Dark, and might have had roaming scare actors and maybe one maze, which was Jack's Frightmare Forest, but other than that, I believe this event was still mostly family-friendly and geared towards younger audiences. Howl-O-Scream 2001 had 3 icons, Torment, the Mangler, and Patricia Gloom, who had to be changed so she wasn't overly sexual or violent, and she was actually the first female icon. Haunted houses included Escape from Insanity and Curse of Tut's Tomb, which was pretty much an overlay of the King Tut attraction, and Escape from Insanity returned as it was in 2000. Other haunted houses included Night Stalkers in 3D and Creeper's Crypt. The final haunted house was Screaming Reality, a journey inside the television with everybody's favorite reality TV shows portrayed horrifically. This year had 3 scare zones: Jungle of Doom, now converted into a scare zone, Inferno Express, based on an evil train yard, and Grizzly Gardens. The gardens came alive to take revenge for being long forgotten. This year also featured light ride overlays, at least on the map. I don't know if in the park the signage was changed at all, but on the map, Kumba became Doomba, Gwazi became Gwazimodo, and Montu became Montomb, which is just a fun little thing to do on the map. I don't know if they put tarps over the signs or anything, but probably not. Williamsburg's event continued to be on a much smaller scale, with only one haunted house being Curse of Pompeii once again. 2002's icon was Death Spirit, a walking zombie with African roots who brought the dead back to life as animals. Haunted houses included the Mortuary returning in the employee parking lot, Demented Dimensions, a 3D house located in the Akbar's Adventure Tours building, Bloody Bayou, a house themed to a clan making homemade horror movies that guests were cast in, Ripper Row, a Jack the Ripper themed house located on the former site of the Black Mamba, Tortured, and Escape from Insanity. Scare zones included Agony Express in the Nairobi train station, Grizzly Gardens in the Congo section of the park, Executioners in Nairobi, and Curse inside Timbuktu. Rip TV 2 and Fiends were the only shows. Busch Gardens Williamsburg's event didn't change that much, with the only haunted house being Curse of Pompeii. 2003 didn't really have an icon, but it did have a new haunted house, Dark Hearts Fear Fair, which would have 4 different experiences, in reality 2 separate paths that split off. Returning haunted houses included Escape from Insanity, Ripper Row, Demented Dimension, Tortured, and the Mortuary. Returning scare zones included Agony Express, Cursed, as well as Grizzly Gardens. The only new scare zone was Speed Demons. 2003 had 3 shows: Fiends returning, Eternal Reward, an edgy musical experience where the audience helps decide the grave outcome, and finally Theater de la Morte Guillotine Show. Busch Gardens Williamsburg's event would feature Nightmare Express, Distorted Dimensions, Sea Dog Cemetery, Sleepless Hollow Manor, as well as Mystical Mayhem and Twisted Terror being 2 ride overlays, as well as Curse of Pompeii returning. The park had 3 scare zones that year, the only new one being Bone Zone and Oktoberfest. Practical Purgatory returned, as well as Festa Dementia. There were 2 shows, Fiends in the Fest House and Jack is Back. Howl-O-Scream San Antonio I couldn't find much information on for 2002, but I assumed Jack's Frightmare Forest was part of the event. Howl-O-Scream 2004 had the tagline No Escape, No Mercy. 2004 featured 6 haunted houses: Escape from Insanity Lockdown in the former monorail maintenance area, Corporate Nightmare. After 5 o'clock, the evil that filled this demented office starts working overtime. Corporate Nightmare was actually originally destroyed by a mini hurricane.
It was built in a 5,000 square foot clear span tent out in Gwazi Field. And it was a house called Corporate Nightmare. And the idea was it was an office building that had been taken over by these dark spirits. And Corporate Nightmare, in its original form, was open 2 nights, a preview night. Your research may correct me, and that's fine. But it was open, I think it was only open 2 nights. It was open a preview night and then the first night of the event. And then we had not a true hurricane, but it was a microburst in the park. And we had to close the event early. We all had to evacuate the park. We got out of the park. We came back once we were clear to come back into the location. And I remember walking out onto the field and seeing this massive white tent that the center had just collapsed. So it now formed a giant M, looking at it, and we all kind of went, oh Lord, what have we done? And the unique thing about that particular haunt is it was the first time we had built really tall walls to make the office seem more confined. And because we had the room in the tent, we were able to do that. And then, so of course, what did we do the moment we discovered that we had lost one of our haunts is we all put our thinking caps on. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize in theme park haunt is when something goes wrong, you got to fix it. You can't just wait until next year because you lose out, on an entire season. So the next weekend we did a scare zone using the same characters and the same concept. And then the weekend after that, we actually moved it to what was at the time King Tut's tomb. which is now, I think, the queue for one of the coasters. But we moved it to King Tut's tomb, and I actually think the move improved it because we made it much smaller, much more claustrophobic. But it was hysterical because basically I got a team of three carpenters, and we salvaged everything we could salvage. We moved it over to King Tut's tomb, and I had them putting up the walls, and I went through and did all the last minute art decoration because, again, all of our contractors had completed their scope of work and had moved on to other projects. So we had to be scrappy. And my favorite thing about it was when we did the map. We actually did the map, and we put the hurricane symbol on it and put a dotted line over to its new location. And we put underneath relocated thanks to hurricane whatever it was. I don't remember what hurricane it was, but it was actually, in my opinion, from a creative standpoint, it was a hidden blessing because I think it actually made the haunt better.
Other haunted houses included Chaos. In this chaotic 3D world, portraits came alive and blocked guests' path, thinking the guests should take their place. Till Death Do Us Part, a house themed to a haunted honeymoon suite, the Mortuary, and Dark Arts Fear Fair. There were 3 scare zones that year. Beware, a fairy tale themed scare zone in the Busch Gardens section of the park. Agony Express returned. And finally, Garden of the Cursed in the Congo section. Williamsburg's event returned bigger than better than ever with more haunted houses, including Distorted Dimensions, Sea Dog Cemetery, Sleepless Hollow, and Curse of Pompeii. Scare zones included Festa Dementia. Carnival gypsies lure guests in a Festa Dementia Freaky Festival residing in the once peaceful hamlet of Festa Italia. Practical Purgatory returned, and Werewolf Reserve. It's not just the wind that's howling in Jack Hanna's Wild Reserve. There's a full moon every Howl-O-Scream evening as werewolves roam the reserve. Shows for that year included Fiends and Monsters Street Party. Howl-O-Scream San Antonio only featured Jack's Frightmare Forest. 2005 would bring a whole new vibe to the event, overhauling the event entirely and bringing a brand new icon.
We spend much of our childhood trying to overcome some basic fears, only to discover later that they haven't gone away. They've just gotten worse. Busch Gardens' all-new Howl-O-Scream. Your fears are far from over.
The event icon would be an evil Jack-in-the-Box in a child's bedroom, which had oddly been featured in Dark Arts Fear Fair the year prior. This year featured 6 haunted houses, the first of those being Deathly Departed, a sequel to Till Death Do Us Part, in which the bride exacted her revenge for the death of her would-be husband. This hunting lodge was burned to the ground to cover the killer's tracks. As such, nobody would hear the screams when guests became prey. Ironically, this house had a small fire when a guest attempted to put a cigarette out on a prop. And After Hours, which replaced Escape from Insanity.
The only reason After Hours was as graphic as it was is that was the 4th year, somewhere in that realm. And my boss came to me and said, Scott, if you didn't have any rules, if the park wasn't going to step in and say, no, that's too much, I came up with the idea of let's do a haunt all about dismembering people and making artwork out of their blood, their teeth, their bones, their tattoos, all that stuff, which was at the time way beyond anything we had ever done.
The Third Dementia was another haunted house that year. Visions of 3D color and light twisted together, a horrible hallucination that deceived eyes and tormented minds. Freaked, the evil Miss Macabre took over Dark Arts Fear Fair, creating even more grisly clowns and freaks to kill guests. The Mortuary, the morning after, this revision centered on the idea that before departing the earth, guests had to relive the morning after their dying day. There was also 5 scare zones that year: Bone Grinders, Restless Death, Wicked Woods, Widow's Walk, and Root of All Evil. And finally, the 2 shows that year were Fiends and Haunt Me Baby One More Time. Busch Gardens Williamsburg's event saw little to no changes, except for the addition of one new haunted house, Last Laugh Industries. The evil clown supply business has been booming, and this company is the leader in offering some gruesome gear. Rumor has it that bike horns and kazoos and rubber chickens aren't the only items being packaged by the evil clown factory workers. Returning haunted houses included Sleepless Hollow Manor, Sea Dog Cemetery, and Curse of Pompeii. And also Jack's Nightmare Express and Jack is Back was another show. Festa Dementia returned, Practical Purgatory, and Werewolf Reserve. Shows included Fiends in the Fest House, Monster Street Party, and the aforementioned Jack is Back. Sierra San Antonio's event did see some changes, but Jack's Frightmare Forest was still the only haunted house. But they did introduce a new show. They transformed the Shamu Adventure daytime show into Shamu's Rock and Creep Show. Now, I want to be clear, this was not the modern version we know today with Bring Me Back to Life. This was a completely different version that was pretty much the Shamu Adventure, just with Halloween music. Now, 2006 would be a interesting year for Howl-O-Scream Tampa, as it would introduce a unique icon that wouldn't really be an icon at all.
Steve, buddy, where are you? Someone is not coming home tonight. What? Neither are. What the?
Who can you really trust? At Busch Gardens Howl-O-Scream, we'd suggest no one.
2006 featured little to no changes from 2005. It featured 6 haunted houses, most of them returning, including Deathly Departed, Freaked, and Hunted. The only new haunted house that year was Trapped in the Walls. The gruesome death of an innocent family made newspaper headlines when it happened. Dark demons that murdered the family still lurked inside the walls of their old house. The fan favorite After Hours, now known as After Hours Club Muse, returned to the monorail maintenance area. In the final haunted house, the Third Dementia returned in the Akbar's Adventure Tours building. There were 5 scare zones that year. Bone Grinders returned, Pharaoh's Revenge, Restless Death, Zombie Junction, and Wicked Woods. This year also featured 3 shows, Fiends, Control Alt Deceased, and The Awakening, which was a show not listed on the park map or website. Busch Gardens Williamsburg's event would see some changes. Jack would return as the icon, and haunted houses like Last Laugh Industries, Sleepless Hollow Manor, and Curse of Pompeii all would return. But they would see one new haunted house replacing Sea Dog Cemetery, Wicked Woods. There was only 2 scare zones that year, Piratical Purgatory and Werewolf Reserve. 2006 actually focused more on shows. Shows included Rockin' Eve's Countdown to Midnight, Starfright Orchestra, Fiends in the Fest House, Jack is Back, and Monster Street Party. Once again, SeaWorld San Antonio's event saw little to no changes from the previous year. Jack's Frightmare Forest returned, as well as Shamu's Rock and Creep Show. 2007 would be a return to form for Busch Gardens Tampa Bay, as since the first time since 2005, they would bring in an event icon, the Death Jockey. 2007's icon would be the Death Jockey, an evil DJ who killed his victims with ear-splitting music and blinding lights. This year would feature 6 haunted houses and 5 scare zones, 2 of those haunted houses being brand new. One of those new haunted houses was Catch Your Breath. An evil motorcycle gang chose a different way to murder 13 victims each year. 2007 became the year of suffocation. They already suffocated 12 of their victims, and they chose a guest as number 13. Another new house that year was Taste of Blood. Once revered as undead royalty, vampires were forced to hide in the subways and sewers to avoid the light. Guests who travel into the abandoned subway system had to escape hungry vampires attempting to feed.
The bumper cars was just a logical building that the ride itself did not have huge penetration. So we were able to convince the team that if we could close bumper cars late August, early September, install the haunt, not run bumper cars until after strike, which was usually mid-November. It really didn't take too much away from the day product, because that was always the challenge, was finding that balance between day product and night product. When we first started, not everybody drank the Howl-O-Scream Kool-Aid right away, and I mean the guests. A lot of them wanted to keep the day product very separate, very, very family-friendly, and of course the Howl-O-Scream folks wanted us to go bigger, bloodier, scarier, more grotesque. So we were always finding that balance, and we had to find ways to not only make certain we weren't negatively impacting the day product, but also to find ways to hide stuff during the day. So everything had to be either covered up or moved off the walkways. It made scare zones really difficult, but we did a pretty good job, I think. But as far as bumper cars, it was basically, it's an indoor space. It's a space that is open. There were some challenges. I mean, obviously, bumper cars have a metal floor, so you can't tap con anything into the ground. Everything had to be weighted with jacks on the back of all the flats and heavy duty sandbags to keep them in place. And you couldn't attach anything to the ceiling because that was a metal grid as well, and a powered metal grid at that. So it had its challenges, but the neat thing about it was just a big open space, with a very low, what appeared to be a very low ceiling, even though it was not as low as most people might think. It was interesting because with Taste of Blood that you mentioned, originally the concept was that was not supposed to be in a subway. It was supposed to be set in a museum because the idea was that the coven of vampires had been around forever, and they had just collected all these things throughout history, and this was their way of displaying it and continuing to generate revenue off of their immortality. But when we moved it to the bumper cars that was the first year we did bumper cars, and when we moved it to the bumper cars, it was like, well, this doesn't have the feeling of a museum. This is really tight and small. So we moved it to a subway. So we actually let the space help dictate some of the creative as well.
The three other haunted houses that year were After Hours, Radiation Alert 3D, and Trapped in the Walls.
I will say that one of the creative risks that I had to be talked into, thanks to my incredible team, is going back to Trapped in the Walls. One of the things that we like to do, because back in the day, we wanted to be budget conscious. We didn't want to completely redo everything in a haunt that was coming back, but we wanted to change it enough so that it would feel new or have a fresh sort of sequel, like horror movies. Horror movies have part 1, part 2, part 3, and you try to tell different parts of the story. One of the biggest risks, at least I thought it was a risk and it really wasn't, was we took Trapped in the Walls and completely reversed it. So what was the finale scene became the entrance scene, and we completely told the story backwards. And when it was suggested, because it was suggested from an operational standpoint, because it would give us a better place to put the queue. And when they said it, I was like, this is not going to work, guys. It's just not going to work. And they said, Scott, just come down, walk through it with us. We know your brain. You'll be able to make it work. And I said, okay. So I went down and I walked through it, and they sort of threw out some ideas, and we volleyed back and forth with ideas from a creative standpoint and how to retell the story. And it actually worked. And the funny thing was, it rated higher backwards than it did forwards. So it's one of those, I was completely wrong. I fully admit it. And I was really glad that I had a team that was smart enough, clever enough, and brave enough to come to me and say, hey, Scott, let's try this. So I thought that was a huge risk, but it really wasn't.
Scare zones included Masters and Monsters, Pharaoh's Revenge, Wicked Woods, Zombie Junction, and Eternal Midnight. Shows included, of course, Fiends returning to the Stanleyville Theater. Freak Show 2007, live freakish performers came together in an all-new show hosted by the evil Professor Black. And Sweet Dreams, the master and mistress of nightmares, fought for control over the body of an unsuspected sleeping person, creating a show filled with music, dancing, and special effects, and a few surprises. 2007 for Busch Gardens Williamsburg would essentially be an entirely new event, as several haunted houses did not return. They would overhaul the event and take advantage of the space they had with the former Drachen Fire Station, creating the Never After. This fully immersive fairy tale themed multi-haunted house experience was unlike something the event had ever done before. They really used all the space they had in the Drachen Fire maintenance area, the station, and the space in between. Returning haunted houses included Wicked Woods and Curse of Pompeii. Shows included Starfright Orchestra, Monster Stomp, Ripper Row, and Fiends in the Fest House. I couldn't find any information on San Antonio's 2007 event, but I assume Jack's Frightmare Forest returned. The late 2000s would kickstart a new era for Howl-O-Scream, one with twice the terror.
sleep.
The icons that year were known as the Raven Twins. Two female twins who were born conjoined, connected by the face, but separated themselves with a piece of broken glass when they were called freaks by the man they both loved. They became twisted serial killers who murder anyone unlucky enough to see their disfigured faces and refuse to see their inner beauty. 2008 would feature 6 haunted houses. Death Row Vengeance, the inmates at Great Echo Penitentiary vowed before their executions they would return to take revenge on those who would not bother to save them from the electric chair or lethal injection. Now the inmates have returned to make good on their dying promise. Reconstruction, the doctor is in. Dr. Edgar von Enks is a mad surgeon who takes his patients apart before putting them back together, with flesh, bone, and steel in gruesome and twisted ways. 13, Eat Your Heart Out. The evil biker gang, the Messengers, have already claimed 12 people. Let's hope that 13 isn't your unlucky number. Returning haunted houses was Taste of Blood, After Hours, The Last Call, and Trapped in the Walls. As far as shows go, Fiends returned to the Stanleyville Theater, and a brand new show, One Wild Night, debuted in the Desert Grill. Now, this show is something you have to see to believe. It's almost like Rocky Horror Picture Show, just without the queer coding. It's bad, but it's charming. There was also 3 scare zones: Internal Midnight, Wicked Woods, and Zombie Junction. Overall, 2008 was an interesting year, and it was more interesting for Williamsburg. Celebrating 10 years of fear, Busch Gardens Williamsburg would debut 6 haunted houses and 3 scare zones. One of these haunted houses was Masquerade, which was a very interesting haunted house for multiple reasons. One of these reasons being it was one of the only times they built a haunted house in the Roman Rapids queue line. Another being, originally, apparently this was supposed to be based off Curse of Dark Castle. And if you read the storyline, which is people going to a party and mysteriously vanishing, it is extremely similar to the storyline for Curse of Dark Castle, as well as the gothic theming. Wicked Woods would be another haunted house located next to Roman Rapids in kind of this open field area, and would be loosely based on the same storyline that Busch Gardens Tampa's Scare Zone was. Curse of Pompeii would return, Dead Time Stories would also make its return, as well as Tormented Tales. And finally, The Beaten Path would also make its return. The 3 scare zones included Werewolf Reserve, The Never After, and Piratical Purgatory. 2008 also featured 3 shows: Monster Stomp Revamped, the Starfright Orchestra, and a brand new show, Rockin' Eve's Wrath. This show was interesting because it didn't really have to do anything with the event, and was more so a live rock show. Jack is Back also returns, but it was more of an opening ceremony of sorts rather than an actual show. Like previous years, I couldn't find much on Howl-O-Scream San Antonio 2008 other than Jack's Frightmare Forest returns. But as this year came to an end, next year would be more spooky than ever. This year would also feature the first interactive website Howl-O-Scream ever had, where the event website would feature interactive moments between the characters and the person visiting the website.
Ooh, I like you. You're just my type.
The event icon that year would be Mrs. Vane, an evil vampire fashion designer who operates the House of Vane, where her vampire models attack and kill photographers. This year would feature 7 haunted houses and 4 scare zones, and 1 roaming horde. The first show you would encounter as you entered the park was the House of Vane Fashion Show, a show displaying Mrs. Vane's fashion icons ending in the killing of an audience member. The first new haunted house for that year would be Nightshade Toy Factory, located in the old monorail maintenance area under the Skyride. Possessed toys come to life from the abandoned Nightshade Toy Factory and terrorize the adults that have forgotten. The other new haunted house for this year was DED Pledge Week. Located in a building back behind Tidal Wave, a mysterious sorority on this college campus was harboring a dark secret. As far as returning haunted houses go, Trapped in the Walls returned, 13 Eat Your Heart Out, now rebranded as just 13, Taste of Blood, and Death Row Vengeance, as well as Reconstruction the Doctor is In, all returned. Scare zones included Unearthed, Banshees, Carnival of the Dead, and Werewolves, as well as roaming hordes across the park. There are 3 shows within the park that year. Fiends made its return to the Stanleyville Theater, Full Moon Cabaret and Magic Show, and Club Envy, a dance party. And finally, shops included the iconic Shop of Horrors, which was of course themed to the event and located at the front entrance of the park. 2009 would bring a lot of changes for Busch Gardens Williamsburg's event, launching it with this terrifying ad.
Oh my.
New scares, new fears, no escape.
2009 would feature 6 haunted houses and 7 scare zones. One of these new haunted houses was the Cavern of Darkness, located in the former Corkscrew Hill building. The second new haunted house was Catacombs, which would be located in the Royal Palace Theater. Revenge of Pompeii was another new house, which was pretty much just Curse of Pompeii rebranded. The fourth new haunted house, located behind Roman Rapids, was Cursed. The fifth new haunted house, Bitten, would be located in the Drachenfire Station. And the final haunted house, Hunted, would be located in the Black Forest picnic pavilions next to the Drachenfire Station. The 7 scare zones included the Chaotic Mischief and Mayhem, the Nightmarish Harvest Hollow, the Wicked Spellbound, as well as the Demented Werewolves, the Strangers Beware, the Moors, and finally the Watchers, with these cool flying ghost props. Guests could see 3 frightening shows, Frankenrock, which replaced Fiends in the Fest House, as well as 2 returning favorites, Jack is Back and Monster Stomp Revamped. Meanwhile, at Stewart San Antonio, they would make Jack a more prominent icon, dubbing that year Hijacked. Jack's Frightmare Forest made its return, as well as a brand new show. A twist on the current Shamu show, Shamu Rocks, would debut as Shamu's Rock and Creep Show. This spooky Halloween show ran during the day and night, and was a fan favorite among many. Moving on to 2010, it would bring a rock-a-new icon to Tampa. Like previous years, the Howl-O-Scream website was updated with a vague teaser of what that year would be themed to, and shortly later they released this commercial.
This is the story of boy meets girl. He broke her heart, then she rocked his world. You're my yesterday, you're my goodbye. You're my light, baby, don't ask me why. You're my ex, you're my ex. You're my ex. Revenge rocks! Howl-O-Scream at Busch Gardens.
2010 featured 8 haunted houses and 4 scare zones, one of those new haunted houses being My Ex Revenge Rocks. Obviously themed to Sylvie and her band, guests would be sneaking backstage and discover the harsh reality behind the band's lyrics, and try to escape her killer band. The next haunted house that was new was Alone, an upcharge haunted house that would send guests in groups of 4 or less into the deranged Master Alexander Dalius's Minotaur Storage, a place to house his vast collection of cultural remains, in which he is now hoarding people in his vast collection. The third new haunted house was not really a new haunted house at all, but rather a re-theme of Trapped in the Walls as Trapped in the Walls Ghost Chasers, in which a paranormal team of investigators entered the original house from Trapped in the Walls and were slowly killed off by the ghosts. DED returns, now connected to Sylvie and her band, as well as Nightshade Toy Factory. Scare zones included Crazed Love, the bleeding hearts of jilted lovers unite through their stories of heartbreak, from the bride left at the altar to the woman that has been cheated on one too many times. These depressed devotees will go to any length to unbreak their hearts and claim revenge. Happy Together doesn't happen here. Road Trip, freewheeling college students set on a road trip to see their favorite band, My Ex. But when their van breaks down on the side of a deserted road, the stranded students soon discovered that the forest surrounding them is filled with half-man, half-beast creatures with a taste for human blood. Light of Doom, try to collect your senses as specters of light and shadow blur the line between this world and the next. Here you'll be challenged to wander through a maze of illumination and fog. Eerie apparitions confound and confuse as they try to trick unsuspecting guests into the light. In the final scare zone, Snakes and Spiders. A meteor crashed to Earth, creating a glowing beacon that lured all things creepy and crawly. Snakes slither and spiders sneak, and swarms larger than your nightmares can imagine. Shows included Sylvie and her band performing in the Gwazi Pavilion and Fiends, as well as Blood Relations.
Oh my God.
2010 featured 5 haunted houses and no scare zones. There was only one new house that year, which was Harvest Hollow. Hunted returned, Cursed, Revenge of Pompeii, and Bitten. That year also only had 2 shows, Monster Swamp Revamped and Frankenrock. Howl-O-Scream San Antonio saw little to no changes in 2010. Jack's Frightmare Forest made its return, as well as the Den of the biggest change was Shammer's Rock and Creep Show was completely overhauled. Of course, Jack still hosted the show, but the music choices were completely changed, and this is the version most people remember. 2011 would mark a change in the event's history. Usually, each park had its own separate theme for the event, but 2011 would mark the first time the event shared the same theme.
In the dark side of the gardens, there's so much you will find. The only thing you have to lose is a little of your mind. Come play in my gardens.
2011's tagline was obviously Dark Side of the Gardens, featuring a creepy theme song and the Lady of the Gardens. At the main entrance of the park, you could find the Howl-O-Scream Shop of Horrors, the shop to buy everything you could imagine from Howl-O-Scream. The entire shop was decorated in the Dark Side of the Gardens theme, and there was a corner of the shop called Sylvie's Closet featuring leftover items from last year. 2011 featured 7 haunted houses, 2 of them being new. One of those new haunted houses was Nevermore, taking guests into the deranged world of Edgar Allan Poe, featuring his novels such as The Telltale Heart, The Black Cat, The Pit, and The Pendulum. The other 2 new haunted houses for that year were Vampire Casino and Zombie Mortuary, which was based on the Dark Side of the Gardens theme for that year, Reconstruction the Doctor is in, and Nightshade Toy Factory. There were no scare zones this year, only roaming hordes. Shows included The Midnight Hour, which was a weird live rock show where vampires performed classic rock hits from over the years. And this show is another weird, charming Howl-O-Scream show that only lasted 1 year. And you can see why if you go watch the video on YouTube, because it's certainly bizarre. And of course, Fiends returned to the Stanleyville Theater, parodying pop culture events from that year. Now, for Busch Gardens Williamsburg, they would also carry over the Dark Side of the Gardens theme from Tampa, and this was a first in the event's history because usually, as you've seen, they have their own separate themes and own distinct vibes. But despite the shared themes, Busch Gardens Williamsburg would carry over no scare zones or haunted houses from Tampa and still have its own unique lineup. The 2 recycled haunted houses were Bitten and Catacombs, but they debuted 3 new haunted houses, Deadline, which was themed to the Pompeii Metro's newest line being under construction when they accidentally hit an ancient pipe, unleashing a mysterious steam into the subway tunnel, infecting everyone. The Dark Tower. For 13 long years, the Dark Tower was locked away from the outside world, existing only in the nightmares who would dare to experience Howl-O-Scream's first and most terrifying maze. And finally, Fear Fair, your typical deranged circus, scary clown-themed house that becomes standard at the event. Scare zones included Widowmakers, ventured deep into the woods of New France, where a solitary logging camp is ensnared by a killer clan of enormous venomous spiders. The loggers are fighting back with their sharpest blades, but these angry arachnids are hell-bent on destruction, and they're ready to capture anyone who wanders into their wicked web of terror. Stitch in Time, this is the realm of the living dead, a land where zombies and monsters roam and where cold eyes search for unsuspecting new victims. Could you become one of them? Grin and Scare It, go ahead, step right up to the creepiest show on earth. The traveling carnival has just crawled its way into Festa Italia, and you'll be one of the very first guests to see what terrible traps these carnies have in store. As they unpack boxes brimming with ghastly tricks, the high-pitched laughter of evil clowns echoes from the shadows. Other two scare zones were Unleashed and Scavengers. Shows included Monster Stomp Revamped, Jack is Back, and Fiends. SeaWorld San Antonio also shared the Dark Side of the Gardens theme, but similar to Williamsburg, shared no haunted houses. Den of the Departed and Jack's Frightmare Forest both returned. Of course, Shamer's Rock and Creep Show returns because it was a fan favorite, still hosted by Jack. Guests could then go next door and see Monster Stomp. While the name sounds familiar, this version of the show was wildly different from the version we have today. And it starts right off the bat with a story.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a deep blue sea, about a couple out on a pleasure cruise. One moonlit Halloween, a fateful Halloween. But in a flash, the day turned dark, the sea turned rough and mean. The pleasure cruise would soon be sunk, the lovers would not be seen, the two were lost at sea. Adrift all night, thinking all was lost, being tossed from wave to wave, the tired duet sang out for help, losing hope of being saved. Their hope drowned neath the waves. The storm, it broke, the moon turned full, they washed up on a beach. The air was thick with the eerie sound of drums and a monster screech! A monster stomping screech!
SeaWorld swapped the Victoria-era London for a lush jungle vibe, which was a pre-existing set from Wild Days. But at its core, this was still a singing and dancing rock show, and they had to pick the most obvious song. Despite the different themes, some aspects of Williamsburg were carried over, such as the drumming knife section and the dancing blacklight skeletons. I love this version because they took a concept that had been done before and changed it to better fit the vibe of their park, although needing to recycle the pre-existing set. But they were creative with it and made it fit. And as charming and weird as this version is, I do love it based on the videos that I watched. And I'll link all three parts in the description below so you can watch them yourselves. But this version is just so fun and different than the Victoria-era one we have today. And thus, we end the first decade about of Howl-O-Scream. This is one of the most unique moments in the event's history because it was finding its footing and continued to be unique and weird and not trying to be Halloween Horror Nights. But the next decade is where things start to change and the event becomes more mature and starts to grow even bigger than ever.
what my top 5 are, and these are not necessarily in order. So I have to put in there After Hours Club Muse, because that was the first haunt that I wrote the entire venue flow by myself for. This was very early on in the history. It was not, it was cool. It was really well executed for us at the time. But as our budgets increased and as our skill set increased, we did get better. But the concept was so cool, and that is that people were going to a goth club, and if you got into the VIP area, you were killed and your body parts were harvested to create artwork. And the whole concept was music plus pain equals art. And it lasted for 3 years, and we did minor changes each year. But I loved that haunt. I loved Alone, which is, to my knowledge, the only time a theme park has ever done a haunted attraction that people went through by themselves. I know other attractions, other theme parks have had ideas. In fact, my friends at Universal were so angry that we did it first because they were planning it for the next year. But Alone was really cool because, again, you went through in groups no larger than 4. And that was a compromise we made with the operations team. But if you went through it the first year, if you went through it by yourself, you got a T-shirt that said "I did it alone." But it actually had a safe word to exit, and that safe word was used regularly throughout that haunt. So that one was really cool just because it pushed so many limits. I really liked Trapped in the Walls, which was about a family that the house had been possessed by demons. And the reason I like that one is because we decided, instead of making it so you walk through all the rooms, you actually were walking between the walls and looking into holes in the wall to look into the scenes. And what it did was it allowed us to it allowed us to control the view of the guest significantly more. So we could do more impactful lighting. We could do some special effects because we could hide them in the proscenium, basically created by the hole in the wall. So that one was kind of fun to do. What else? Let's see. That's 3. I love The Experiment. That was the follow-up to Alone. The Experiment was basically testing how far we could push fear. And that's where we created the character that ripped off his own face, which was really fun. That also was the one where we put the button to get out of one of the rooms in the bottom of a filthy toilet. I mean, we just got gross, and we had a good time doing it. It was not as popular as Alone, but it did very, very well, and it was creepy. And then finally, oh gosh, there's so many. They're sort of in the middle there. I really liked Till Death Do Us Part, which was the wedding gone wrong. And there were certain scenes in there that I really liked. We did a Headless Bride, which was kind of cool. We did the one that I always remember is the attic. We did an attic that had fans in it that was blowing the curtains, and it had all these creepy little antique toys. And there wasn't a whole lot of jump startle scare in that room, but it was just a creepy atmosphere that I really liked. So at this moment, those would be my top 5. Now, you could ask me again in 2 weeks and I could completely change my mind, but at this moment, those would be my top 5.